I'm absolutely clear that we do want a reset with Europe, a reset with the EU. That does not mean reversing Brexit or re-entering the single market or the customs union, but it does mean a closer relationship on a number of fronts, including the economy, including defence, including exchanges.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the UK Political Circus, where we examine the latest performances from our beloved Westminster entertainers. Today's main attraction, Sir Keir Starmer's spectacular EU summit announcement. Yes, you heard that right.
Peace will come through strength, and we must do all that we can to support Ukraine's defence. So I'm here to work with our European partners on keeping up the pressure, targeting the energy revenues and the companies supplying his missile factories to crush Putin's war machine.
The same Labour Party that promised to respect Brexit is now planning a cosy little get-together with EU leaders on May 19th. How absolutely delightful. Oh, but don't worry, dear viewers. This isn't about reversing Brexit. No. It's just a reset of relations. Because apparently, when Labour says reset, it's totally different from when your computer does it and goes back to factory settings. Let's meet our ringmaster for this particular circus act, shall we? Nick Thomas Simons, the government minister appointed by Sir Keir himself, who's declared, and I quote, "The time for ideologically driven division is over." Well, that's rich, coming from the party that's been dividing its own voters faster than a circus performer splitting their trousers. Speaking of splits, let's look at Labour's track record of keeping promises, shall we? They promised to respect the Brexit vote until they didn't. They promised to stand by their manifesto until they didn't. They promised not to raise taxes until they... well, you get the pattern.
On the question, firstly, of tariffs, obviously it's early days. I do think it's right for us to acknowledge the role that the US have played in relation to the joint effort on Ukraine. And that's, of course, pivotal because it's not just a question of a war or the sovereignty of Ukraine. It is not just a European issue. It's a question of global security. And one thing that's come out of the awful conflict in Ukraine is actually a stronger and bigger NATO, which I think is really important.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, for our main act, the Great EU Summit Spectacular. Watch in amazement as Sir Keir attempts to walk the political tightrope between pleasing EU leaders and not alienating British voters. Marvel at the diplomatic gymnastics as he discusses youth mobility schemes while trying not to mention the word freedom of movement. Step right up, folks. See the amazing vanishing act of Labour's Brexit principles. Watch as they make your fishing waters disappear right before your very eyes. But wait, there's more. In this incredible performance, you'll witness a new partnership with the EU, definitely not the old partnership with a fresh coat of paint, honest. A defence pact, because apparently NATO wasn't enough. And the spectacular sight of trade barriers potentially dropping faster than Labour's poll numbers. Now let's look at some actual numbers, shall we? Between 2021 and 2023, EU exports to the UK dropped by 32%, while UK exports to the EU fell by 27%. Significant numbers, indeed. But here's the real magic trick. Labour thinks they can fix this without giving away the sovereignty we fought so hard to retain. And who better to comment on this than our favourite Brexit ringmaster himself, Nigel Farage? He's warned that cozying up to the EU might damage our relationship with America. Though personally, I think we should be more worried about Labour damaging their relationship with reality. But fear not, dear viewers. Sir Keir assures us this closer relationship doesn't mean cancelling Brexit, just like how sitting in the front row of a circus doesn't mean you'll get wet from the water acts, except when it absolutely does. So there you have it, folks. Labour's latest spectacular performance in the great political circus. Kemi Badenoch might accuse them of trying to reopen the divisions of the past, but I'd say they're more interested in opening a new chapter in their book of U-turns. Remember, in this circus, the clowns aren't wearing red noses, they're wearing red ties. And while the show must go on, one has to wonder, how many more acts can Labour perform before their audience finally decides to leave the big top?
Mr. Speaker, in December 2020, I was in my office working on the expected Brexit deal. With my team, we had to analyse the deal as it came in at speed, prepare and deliver a live statement at speed on one of the most important issues for our country in recent years. That's what I was doing. What were they doing? Suitcases of booze into Downing Street, partying and fighting.
Then we have Kemi Badenoch, who's not mincing her words at all. She's accused Sir Keir of trying to reopen the divisions of the past and edge us back into the EU. Now, isn't that just a fancy way of saying, we know you've been letting us down, so here's another circus act for your viewing pleasure? Kemi's right to be sceptical. After all, the Labour Party has a knack for disappointing its own supporters. It's like watching a clown repeatedly promise a grand finale, only for the final act to be a flat tire and a pile of confetti. And you, dear viewer, know how much we love a bit of confetti right before it falls on our parade. But let's not forget the kicker. Labour's plan includes not just a reset on Brexit, but also a youth mobility scheme that would allow under-30s from EU countries to live and work in the UK for 4 years. Yes, while many Britons are still wondering if the circus is even in town, the party is busy offering free rides to the young and restless from across the Channel. One has to wonder, is this a brilliant stroke of modernisation or just another way to distract us from the fact that Labour's track record is as underwhelming as a clown with no tricks up his sleeve? Now let's examine the rhetoric that's been paraded about this summit. Our dear Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds declared, "The time for ideologically driven division is over. The time for ruthless pragmatism is now." A bold statement indeed, if only we could all agree on what ruthless pragmatism actually means in practice. And yet, despite these grandiose promises, the Labour Party has been, shall we say, consistently inconsistent. The party that once vowed to deliver for the people now finds itself balancing more on a tightrope than a befuddled acrobat with no safety net. So here we are on the eve of what's being billed as the first UK-EU summit of a new era. On one side we have Sir Keir Starmer, our jester-turned-ringmaster, trying to convince everyone that he's leading us into a bold new partnership with Europe. On the other, critics like Farage and Badenoch are waving red flags and pointing out that, quite frankly, the last time we saw Labour in charge, the only thing that improved was the number of circus acts at a children's party. And let's be honest, if Labour's history is any indicator, the only ringmaster in this circus who knows where the elephants are hiding is someone else entirely. Now, let me ask you something, dear viewers. After years of promises that evaporate faster than a magic trick performed by a dodgy illusionist, can we really trust Labour's latest promise of a reset on Brexit? Is this summit just another act in the political circus, a dazzling display of smoke and mirrors, with Sir Keir juggling half-truths and the rest of his party acting like clowns in a car crash? Or, dare I say it, is it simply the inevitable result of a party that's been spectacularly failing to deliver on its promises for far too long? Let's not beat around the bush any longer. We've seen Labour's performance over the past, a series of bungled policies, missed opportunities, and enough ideological backflips to make a contortionist blush. Now, with this summit, it appears that Sir Keir is trying to pull off one last act to regain lost credibility. But as we all know, in this circus, even the biggest acts eventually come tumbling down, preferably with a resounding splat that leaves the audience laughing all the way home. As Sir Keir prepares for his historic dinner with EU leaders, the first PM to do so since Brexit, one can't help but wonder if he's ordered his words with a side of having it both ways. But then again, that's been Labour's specialty dish for quite some time now, hasn't it? This is our channel reminding you, in politics, as in the circus, always check if there's a safety net before watching the high-wire acts. Good night, and God save us all from political acrobatics.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I can assure the honourable member for Rugby that Reform want healthcare to be free at the point of delivery... I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. There appears to be some panic on that side of the House. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.